Morning.
Good morning.
I apologize for dragging down this morning. I'm having a real problem with my body temperature these days. And during this session, every time I came up here to sit, I found myself dripping all over my zabuton. Even in the breeze, I was sweating. I don't know what it is. Nobody knows what it is. Probably has something to do with the 16 or 17 different medications I'm taking right now. I wanted to talk today about me. I have had, over the past 6 years, the great good fortune to have a stage 4 cancer. Many of you are aware of this. It has been exactly 2 years from today that I was told that my cancer was terminal. So I have had 2 years to live with the dreaded question of life and death. And people who know me always say that my practice must be a blessing in this situation. And I always respond by saying, yes, it is. But I never have the opportunity or the time to explain why it is. And I can't think of any literature, and I'm, I guess you would say, a very literate man, but I can't think of any literature that describes such a thing. Everybody talks about how a practice of Zazen is so great in times of stress and trouble, but they never really describe, perhaps with the exception, I can think of one person after all, Pema Chodron, who talks about how to get through difficult times specifically. I would like this morning to try and describe to you how it is that I've gotten through this period of my life. I want to begin by talking about the importance of being in the present moment. I have spent most of my practice sailing along, doing the things that I've been told to do by my teachers and by the things that I've read. But I have to say that until you have the sentence of death, you're not really confronting the issues, or at least I wasn't. Because everybody that I mention this to is very quick to say, oh, yes, we all have to die. you know, try it. Getting a forecast of death within a relatively short time is altogether different than some abstract notion about dying at some point in the more or less remote future. My sentence was for a year. I could expect to live for about a year. And I want to mention that I made the decision to stop all treatment. They wanted to put me on a maintenance program that would control the growth of my tumor. And I saw this as an attempt to subject me to yet more chemotherapy and the extraction of money from myself and the government. And I decided that the chemotherapy alone was too high a price to pay. I had already had 4 years of chemotherapy. I had proven my distaste for it. So I cut myself loose, and my doctor asked me if there was anything that I needed, and I said yes. I want enough drugs to put me out. And without saying a word, he sat down and wrote me a prescription for 180 tabs of hydromorphone, clinical heroin. That's enough to put out a herd of elephants, actually. But he has been very supportive of the decisions I have made about my own health care, which is quite a change from the time when I was a hospice volunteer back in the 90s, when death with dignity was a vague whisper in the air. And today there is a course before the Supreme Court of the state of New Mexico trying to decide this issue as to whether death with dignity becomes part of state law in this state. Now, let me say that I don't really have any intention of doing myself in. But I'll tell you this, when I made that wish and that wish was fulfilled, it was a relief. Because I knew what I was facing. I've been around the medical profession enough to know what this kind of a cancer does, and how it works, and how it kills you. And it was a comfort to me to be able to pull a switch on that at any time. But as far as doing it, that's a whole other issue. You know, I ask you to consider my situation. At what point do you think enough is enough? It's not easy. There are all sorts of reasons to want to remain in this manifestation. And I have yet to encounter the situation where this manifestation is too unbearable. And I don't know if I ever will. But at least I have the peace of mind to be able to take the pressure off myself and off the people around me, and especially my wife. If push comes to shove. It's an interesting question, you know, at what point does an awake person make that decision? At what point? Because there is part of me, a part of me inside myself, or what I call myself, that doesn't have cancer. His name is Daishin. The guy who has cancer is David. And David has all sorts of problems with having cancer. Daishin doesn't. And in connection with this, I want to read you a koan. It's my favorite koan. This is my koan of all time, which of course will change in a couple of weeks. This is case 33 out of the Shoyu Roku. Ungun sweeps the ground. Attention! As Ungun was sweeping the ground, Dogo said, "You're hard at it." Ungun replied, "You should know there's one who isn't hard at it." Dogo said, "So, is there a second moon?" Ungun held up the broom saying, "Which moon is this?" Dogo desisted. Regarding this, Gensho remarked, "Indeed, this is the second moon." Uman also said, "The butler watches the maid politely." Well, I am very much aware of my butler. My butler is my awake mind. And my awake mind doesn't have cancer. Can you see that? For me, it is a great place of refuge. Because it is accessible to me at any time, under any circumstances. I can go there in a flash. The butler also resides in the present moment. Now, in spite of what we call it, it has no dimension of time. It is just right now. Right here. And it is the key to reality. The times when I am at my worst distress are the times when I am in the future or I am in the past. Those two places are filled with crocodiles. And they will eat you alive. In those two places reside the King of Death. king of death has no hold, no grasp of the present moment, which is the true key to reality. Now I want to read you a poem about this that was given to me by Musai Roshi. He gave it to me on one of my Rakusus, on the back of one of my Rakusus. I probably have more Rakusus than any person in the Zen game. And they are of every color I can think of. This is on my second brown one. And I've made a bunch of copies of this, if any of you want to. I hope you don't mind if I distribute this poem.
Not at all.
This is on my brown Rakusu, which was given to me on the occasion of my Shiho. That was back when? Was that?
10, 11 years ago?
Seems like it, doesn't it?
Maybe longer?
I think it was 2006 or something like that. I'm not sure.
I don't know. It says on the back of your Rakusu.
Not on this one.
No?
Now, this one's on my second brown Rakusu.
Oh, okay.
This is my auxiliary brown. What must you know as a Zen teacher? That there is no refuge but the life of this moment. Not only is there no self, there is no Buddha, Dharma, Sangha apart from the life and death of this moment. And oh yes, there is no present moment. Know this without falling into despair, cynicism, and inaction. Yes, there is no present moment. But you better act like there is. Because it will save your life. What this thing that inhabits me at the moment is called life. Life and death, birth and death, existence, non-existence, coming and going, all of this. One thing that must always accompany the present moment is impermanence. I spent every day on my cushion examining impermanence. Shakespeare wrote a play that probably many of you know about, in which the title character says, to be or not to be? That is the question. To which I think the Buddha would reply, to be or not to be is not the question. They are simply two ideas that are opposed to each other. And they are not descriptive of anything in this existence. They are, as we might say, empty. You know, I'd like to say to all the people here today who are new to this practice, that Buddhism has a lot of terms, a lot of words that are extremely difficult to come to terms with. Emptiness is one of those terms. Impermanence is one of them. No self is one. Nirvana is the grandmother of all those terms. They are merely keys, tools, if you will, that help us unlock their true meaning. You know, emptiness, for example, has a lot of different meanings, doesn't it? I mean, we're all familiar with the ones that we commonly use in this culture about empty. Emptiness has to do with some sort of a vessel which does not contain something. But emptiness can also be defined as having no abiding characteristics. That's another very common definition that we use in this practice. Emptiness has another definition that I prefer myself, and that is, emptiness is the extinction of ideas. So that when we talk about the emptiness of being or non-being, of life and death, of coming and going, and everything else we can talk about, all these dualistic subjects, we say that they're empty because they're devoid, they're nothing but ideas. They are not a description of reality. The same thing is true of impermanence. Same thing. Nirvana, the very definition of nirvana is devoid of all notions. But there is one problem with these words, and I'm sure that many of you have encountered it. I know that I have spent half a lifetime trying to get through this shrubbery. And that is that you can become caught by these words themselves. And I want to quote something from the Ratnakuta Sutra, spoken by Shakyamuni Buddha. If you are caught by the notion of being and non-being, then the notion of emptiness can help you to get free. But if you are caught by the notion of emptiness, there's no hope. You see? Well, impermanence works very much the same way. You know, we have a cognitive definition for what impermanence is, and we think that is sufficient for us to have. But you have to go beyond that. You have to find a real, deep, innate feeling about impermanence and what it is and how it works. And that's what I spend a lot of my time on my cushion doing. I am looking for a deeper insight of impermanence so that even the term impermanence disappears. So that it becomes a part of your life. And when that happens, you are free of it. having a sense of impermanence in the face of extinction, I have found for myself to be very important. Because impermanence does not comprise going or coming, or existence or non-existence, or birth or death. Impermanence is simply a mixing of the manifestations. Transformation. I'm not facing death, I'm facing a transformation. You see? And it's reasonable, I think, for me to suppose that I have done this before. I don't necessarily know under what conditions or where I came from or how I got here. I'm not going to dabble in past lives. But for me, it is a great solace to be able to look upon my future as simply a change of manifestation. So this, in brief, is how I have used my practice to face this, I don't know what to call it, whatever. And it really is not any different than anything else in my life. It's not any different from any other thing that I have done or has happened to me. It's not any different from any success I may have had in the past or failure. It's just what it is. It's the ultimate suchness, I think. So, any questions?
Can we take a rain check?
Mm-hmm.
We'll take a rain check on that.
You guys are cowards.
Yep. Our true souls.
If you say
Nothing
it's
to be asked.
transformation, then something's transforming. But you're saying there isn't any existence, or, so if there's no existence, then how do you have transformation?
I have a lawyer you You know, it's really easy to get caught up in words. And words really are very bad conveyors of ideas. You know, I would have to say that the human race, this species, is very bad at thinking. It's much better at feeling. It's much better at empathy, if it would recognize that and let itself do that. But thinking, not so much. Transformation, and what was the other word that you used?
Non-existence.
Non-existence. I don't know what that means. I have a real problem with non-existence. The transformation part I get, but the non-existence part, I,
Doesn't exist.
does, I wouldn't even say that. You see, there comes a point at which everybody has to fall silent. You know? And that may be the real significance of death. Falling silent. You know, like in Ickew's death poem. Don't ask me any questions. I won't answer.
But first he says, I'll still be here.
That's right. That's
I'm
right.
not going anywhere. I'll still be here.
But I ain't saying nothing. Anything else? No?
No.